Joining me now, Grover Norquist. Everybody knows Grover. Hey, Grover, everybody's kind of forgetting about the one big, beautiful bill that kicks in right now. Your 2025 taxes, when you put them in, we expect the biggest refunds in American history back to people. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Social Security taxes are down. We got all kinds of tax cuts. Small businesses get to write off 100% of whatever they did in capital investment. That's why we made in 2025 probably $200,000 into equipment, only because we could write it off. We never would have done that. So all that's going to be coming back. Grover, that's not really kicked into anything. It's not really part of anybody's economic equation. What kind of an impact is the one big, beautiful bill, Grover, going to have on the economy? Grover Norquist.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. One way to think about this is to remember what happened in the second year of the Republican tax cuts, the Trump Republican tax cuts from his first term. In the second year, when a lot of these things kicked in, not the first year when people weren't sure what was what, but when the lower taxes, the expensing for new investment, as you point out, allowed companies to get better computers, better trucks, better equipment, build new plants and equipment. This all kicks in terms of job creation and wage increase. When you have more capital per worker, more investment per worker, you have more productivity. That's why America's richer than Bangladesh. We're not nicer. We have more capital per worker. And if you are a farmer with a cow and a horse, you don't make as much per hour as if you have a John Deere tractor. And that's because the amount of capital per worker allows you to pay all the workers more. In the second year of the Trump Republican tax cut from the first term, you saw about 6.8% increase for the median family income. Now, we then got hit with COVID a year later, which didn't help. But that second year, you saw what happens when the lower tax rates on companies, on individuals, and zero taxes on new investment, full expensing. So I think it's extremely looking good moving forward. We're hearing companies announce the very significant increases in investment this year and in future years. The president's done a couple of press conferences with other countries and businesses overseas talking about what they're going to invest in the United States. But more important than that is what Americans are investing. We have more capital. What we're investing in the United States, as opposed to consuming or just sitting on top of it. So these are very, very helpful signs, and I think good news for the economy moving forward.
Listen, people just don't realize what this means. Everybody is discounted it. That's why I really wanted to have you on today, Grover, January 5th. By the way, Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. One of the beauties of this is a lot of payroll companies didn't catch up with overtime and tipping. So what happened is you got your taxes still taken out for overtime. They were still taken out for tips by whoever you were working for, because the payroll companies didn't catch up with it. This is kind of the untold story. And so now they're starting to, but you got all this money that's been taken from you that is all going to come back in the form of a refund in April, May, June, July that nobody saw really coming except us, and it's going to be massive.
Oh, yes. And the IRS has said they expect to be writing more refund checks, bigger refund checks in this coming year than in history. And you point out one reason. The other is, and even independent contractors, people who control their own taxes and when they pay them quarterly, they're in a position where they may have missed what the Republicans tried to say very loudly, and that was, even though this bill will not pass until July, this is back at the beginning of this last year,
right?
It will take effect on January 19th, the day before the president became president. He didn't want Biden to be getting any credit for anything. So all of the tax cuts were retroactive to January 19th through the year. So people who are thinking, well, the bill passed in July, Now, no tax on overtime. Now, no tax on tip. Well, yeah, but the previous 6 months also, and that's where a lot of people who do their own taxes just didn't realize, because this has not always been done before. We ended up in the first Trump year. We didn't get the tax bill passed until December. That's how long it took. And then it didn't take effect until January of 2018. Okay. Um, this time around, the Trump people and the Republicans said, you know what we're going to do? Tell everybody immediately this takes effect as soon as we came into office, even though we may not pass it until, and July was really hurrying. It could have, taken several months. It's not easy to write a big bill with lots of people's concerns, but we wanted to make sure that just because Congress was going to take a while to get it passed, that people needed to know, start investing now. Your taxes on investment, taxes on new jobs, that goes away January last year. So there'll be a lot of checks going out to people who didn't expect them. They'll be larger than people expected. So adjust your withholding for next year, for this year, because you don't want to be lending money to the government. Um, Pay less in the beginning, and that's the great thing about the Republican tax cuts.
What people don't realize, and I'm so glad you brought this out, Grover, why I'm now after Venezuela, which I'm totally in favor of. What Trump did, the boss finally made a big move, and hopefully this continues, and we get some chutzpah now. We get a spring in our step back. But the thing is, that people don't realize is these tax cuts were retroactive back to January, like you said. And as you started to bring up, if you're 1099, for instance, you were paying estimated taxes in the first and second quarter of 25 based on the tax law of not of 24, right? So you were overpaying and you kind of forgot about that. Now those taxes are going to go down, and even if you kept paying what you were doing in the next 2 quarters, there's going to be a refund back. So the refunds back are going to be massive, and I think that's really going to change the way people are looking at the economy. Coupled with the fact that businesses, even though many of them took advantage of the investment for new equipment, like our little company did in 25, well, that carries over into 26. It isn't just like it's a one-shot deal. If Ann and I buy more new equipment in 26, we get the same 100% write-off.
Oh, and that's permanent. That's the other piece to this is most of these taxes from the first Trump administration that were temporary, because under the rules of the time you could only make them temporary, are now made permanent. And companies don't invest to build a new factory for the next 2 weeks or 2 years or 20 years. They invest for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-year lifespans of new investment of plant and equipment. And they need to know that the tax cut that's we should invest as a tax cut. How long does the tax cut last? It is almost impossible for the Democrats to take this away. One of the painful things to think about is that if we hadn't passed the extension of the Republican tax cuts, there was going to be a $4 trillion tax increase over the next decade, and then again each decade out into the future. We stopped the largest tax increase in American history from happening, and every single Democrat in the House and the Senate voted to have that $4 trillion tax increase. So you're not only looking at the tax cuts that got passed, we dodged and stopped permanently the Democrat threat of a $4 trillion tax increase. Talk to your Democratic congressmen and senators and ask them why. And it doesn't matter what their name is. They all voted for a $4 trillion tax increase by voting against the Republican bill.
I mean, it is the untold story, these tax increases, and for anybody out, these tax cuts. If anybody out there is listening, I mean, you own a business or 1099, if you did so much as buy for your business a new air conditioner, right? Simple thing like that. It doesn't matter what it is. 100% of that gets written off if it's exclusively for your business entity in the first Yeah, so it doesn't matter. It's not like, well, I bought this, $100,000 piece of equipment or some of the new transmitters like we did. But no matter what you invested in and purchased for your company, if it was new equipment, you get 100% deduction on your 25 taxes. That is, and a lot of business owners, I'm telling you, don't even realize it because they think, well, this is for like big equipment, like I bought a big piece of machinery or I bought a tractor. No, it's like if you have to install a new heater in your office and that was like $5,000, that's written off.
Yeah, at our website, atr.org, atr.org/list, we have the list of people who've written in and said, this is the investment my small company made because of the tax cuts. This is what it means to me as one of the 10, 12, 13 million Americans who's an independent contractor, many of whom work with tips as an important part of what they do. Uber drivers, waiters, waitresses, the people who do your nails, the people who cut your hair, um, people who deal the cards in Las Vegas, millions of people, they recognize that they're getting these lower taxes, and life is easier for them as a result. And they're writing in notes at atr.org/list saying, here's what it meant to me and how I can save for my kids' education, both on no tax on tips, overtime, and also, as you were saying, the expensing, where businesses are creating jobs, making people more productive, and allowing people to get paid more and getting air conditioning.
Grover Norquist with us, the leader on cutting taxes in the United States for many years, the president of ATR, American Tax Reform. Grover, how does this translate? How does the Trump economy with the new tax cut bill, the one big beautiful bill, how does this translate to affordability, which is the number one issue now
Yeah.
driving many Americans?
Affordability has two sides to it. One is how much is your income? And more importantly, what is your after tax income? If you earn more money because of the tax cuts and the less regulation, which we need to highlight as well, then you have more money. Then everything's more affordable, right? Everything's more affordable if you have a real pay increase beyond the inflation. The other piece is the costs of things. And so affordability is very important, but the Democrats, their trick is pay no attention to how much you're earning, even though that's the big deal, and why affordability during the Biden years became so problematic was that your pay was worth less because of Biden's inflation, over 20% during his presidency. But on lower prices, what does it take to get lower prices? Lower taxes on businesses, drop prices. The president used a lot of tariffs to negotiate down other tariffs, and now he doesn't need them. And the Supreme Court's probably going to make some of them go away. Lower tariffs, reduce the cost of everything that you buy, make things more productive. The president took tariffs off foodstuffs, coffee, and other things that we import. So those have brought prices down as well. And by not going to war against energy, which the Democrats have done for a couple of decades now, the price of energy, gasoline, home heating, is down from what it would have been, and actually down in real terms recently. So, what's less regulation as one of the things? It's tough to take credit for when you stop something awful from happening in the future because it didn't happen and most people weren't paying attention it was going to. But the regulatory onslaught written in by Obama and Biden that was getting worse and worse and worse, much of that's being taken off the table. The president said, we're not going to make all the cars very expensive with all these regulations about how many miles you have per hour, how many miles per hour, how many miles per gallon you have to drive and so on, because we're going to let you make that decision as a consumer. You want a big car, you want a safe car, or you want a less safe car that's made out of tinfoil, which is what the Democrats wanted everybody to drive because it didn't use as much gasoline. Well, if you keep gas prices low by looking for more gasoline and oil, then you can afford to drive as much as you want to, and you shouldn't be telling people what to do. Those reduced regulation and disappeared regulations, and all this the fake energy stuff, or this it's not fake energy, it's just subsidized energy. It's not real energy because it only works when it's subsidized, so it's not real. Uh, the president's getting rid of those subsidies so that you buy real energy at real costs, not hidden costs.
Grover Norquist, let me ask you this, and it's good to have you with us. That's why we wanted to launch Monday, January 5th with
Yeah.
the great Grover Norquist, President, American Tax Reform, been
John,
fighting this battle his whole life. And 2026, you're going to see all these tax cuts now really kick in. It's going to make a huge difference in people's lives. You talked about energy. Let's get to Trump's bold move in Venezuela.
mhm.
I want to get your take on it because we got the unholy alliance going on right now. That I don't know what your position is, but we haven't talked about it. But we got the unholy alliance between the fake news media propaganda complex and the phony MAGA clickbaiters uh, joining sides in opposing this, let's call it, takeover of Venezuela. But President Trump's saying, look, I'm going to bring the oil companies in. We're going to get oil under $50 a barrel. He's not shy about saying it. I'm not shy about couching it. This is part of this is to get this oil down, get gas prices down to $1.50. But we got the right-wing clickbaiters now combined with the fake news media in blasting this. What say Grover Norquist about Venezuela intervention?
Well, this is something the president was looking at doing in the first term, uh, and might have done in a second term 4 years ago. But Venezuela is being supported by Iran, the Soviet Union, Russia, and communist China. And from Venezuela, they're causing all sorts of havoc, not just the drugs that come into the United States, but you can imagine when uh, 6, 7 million Venezuelans fled the country. It's that bad when socialism takes over. I get a kick out of the socialists in Venezuela being removed just as the socialists are showing up in New York City promising to govern just like the Venezuelan dictatorship. We're going to do that. Well, okay, I'm looking forward to when New York removes their socialists the way the people of Venezuela have been trying to get rid of theirs. Uh, Venezuela, the oil they do produce, not very well because they're socialists, uh, subsidizes Russia, China, and most importantly, Cuba. This is probably the death knell for the Cuban dictatorship. That without Venezuela as a hub from which the Russians, the Chinese, and Iranians can operate, we'll have a lot less terrorism, a lot less spy networks coming through. Colombia will probably have to change its government because it will no longer have the support of the dictatorship in Venezuela. A lot of the Venezuelans who'd like to go home, I'd love to have them stay. They're going to be great Republicans, but they'll have an opportunity to go home if we get a decent government there to replace the dictatorship that they had. And my sense is that in 2 years, Cuba will not be a communist country.
So you think the Cuban government will fall?
Yes,
How?
without the subsidies and without Venezuela makes it possible for Cuba, for China, Russia, and Iran to operate freely at a distance from the U.S., not right on top of Cuba, and that will become increasingly difficult for them to function, and it cuts up the networks. And you can imagine the intelligence bonanza that is there for the Americans and the other Latin American countries that have been subverted through Venezuela to find out who the spies are and where they are.
How do you see the government of Cuba falling? Like, lay that out for us. What's
Well,
your vision
they
for it?
lose the subsidies that they've been getting from Venezuela, both cash and low energy costs. Russia used to provide that for them, but now Russia's largely poor and fighting their own war that's bankrupting them uh, in their neighbor state of Ukraine. So that pressure right there, and we just demonstrated to the world that the Soviet colony in Venezuela fell apart and will end. I think the people in Cuba will feel comfortable rising up as well, and then the government there goes, "Who's there to defend us?" and to protect the communist dictatorship there. And who wants to keep the communist dictatorship going there? It's not exactly been very successful. It's been a massive failure, very expensive, and they've seen Cuban Americans become very successful, and they all get letters home. They know what it's like on the other side of the Berlin Wall.
Grover Norquist, I want to thank you for that insight. Thanks for being with us today, and thanks for being real America first and not like these phony MAGA clickbaiters out there whose business model, as you know, is based on sowing division within the MAGA movement. That's all this is about. So that's what it's ever been about. So thank you for that. Grover, people want to follow you. Where do they go?
Sure. HER.org is our website, Americans for Tax Reform, HER.org, and I tweet at Grover Norquist.
Thank you, Grover. Thanks for being with us. By the way, you look great. I don't know how you're able to do this year after year, but you're the guy that never ages. I guess when you're out there every day talking about tax cuts, it's got to do
invigorating.
Plus, you married up like me. That's another thing we have.
All that good stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Grover, thanks for being with us. Nick Freitas coming up in a couple of minutes. Stay with us.